It's my pleasure to welcome you once again to a Friday episode of my channel, Ask Pastor Nike. My name is Nike Ayola. Please remember to share this video on parenting with other families so you can secure your own children's future. And don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. Thank you. I want to jump in right here in this video, by stating its two-pronged mission upfront. These are the two things I want to achieve. First is to give everyone who needs it a template for how to create boundaries and to continue to evaluate them for effectiveness. The second is to talk about the importance of communicating properly with our children. Now, I mentioned that in the last episode, if you remember. So let's go straight into talking about a template for creating boundaries for our kids. I hope you all still remember the important things I shared before we got to this point. For proper continuity, I will quickly run through the most important things for setting the stage for this life-impacting exercise. Remember that in the beginning, you are the one pursuing your child and not yet they pursuing you. Give them an enabling and validating environment by assuring them of your commitment and presence and by loving your spouse openly for them to see. Bring your heart, not a judgmental attitude, and have great expectations for both you and your children. Articulate the goal or purpose of the boundary. What is it meant to achieve in and for the child? Boundaries should not be about you or your feelings, so fix your eyes on the eternal, on the long term, and not on what is trending or what people will say or think about you or your family. Boundaries should be fluid and tweaked and expanded or even completely removed as children grow older. Then, the boundaries you give must be sustainable. There should be no gaps or loopholes. The last thing to keep in mind are that you must be in total agreement with the other parent, whether you are married to them or not, and that the boundaries must be easily communicated to and understood by the child or children. Finally, run everything by God and trust Him with the unknown. All right, a template for creating boundaries now. Your value system is a portrait of the lines you will never cross. Now, I saw that somewhere, and it's relevant because the lines you won't cross are your boundaries. And the place to start from as you set out, to create boundaries for your children and even for your other relationships in every other space is to determine what your values are, what boundaries you have set for your own life. This is actually deeper than most people think because many of us are used to skimming the surfaces of our thoughts and our activities. And sometimes it's because digging deeper could be painful and it can exhume some truths about our characters that we can't or are not ready to deal with. Your values are not explanations you give yourself about what you did or do, but about why you did or do them. Your values are the why behind your what. Your actions, what you do, are glaring enough for you and others to see. But the more important question is the reason why you did it. That is actually the crux of the matter. And it is what concerns God about our actions too. So you can agree with me that values and boundaries are deeply spiritual. And can you also see how not having definitive values and boundaries can be a setup for failure or at least lead to a life that falls way short of what it could have been? Yeah. Now we're going to deal with this in a little bit when I start giving the step-by-step guidelines for creating boundaries. Let's explore the whys of our words a little bit more. Ask yourself the number one question kids everywhere ask, including yours and maybe your grandchildren, for parents with adult children like me. Whenever they are told to do something, usually that thing they don't like or want to do, I'm sure you've observed that the question kids always ask is, why? Or why? I mean, it can come with different tones or inflection of voice. It can be defiant, inquisitive, or fearful, but it's still the same. Why? What they want to know, which is also what you as the parent should be communicating to them, are your values behind the boundaries and the rules that you're making for them. And many times, we shut our children's why questions down because we don't know what our own values are, or because we are just parroting someone else's values, or because we just think children should be controlled anyhow. So, instead of shutting down our kids' questions, because we think that as a parent, we don't owe them any explanation. And I must confess, I used to think like that too. We need to start arming our kids with the requisite tools for sound decision making from an early age by not simply laying down the law, but by giving them credible explanations for their why questions. Look, the honest truth is that if you're already losing the battle at the basic and rudimentary level of why questions about don't touch this or don't go there, you will still lose when the stakes are much higher, with why questions on alcohol, sex before marriage, cohabitation, and other things that you will have to deal with when your kids get older or if you're already dealing with older children. Creating boundaries is actually a part of the training that God is talking about when He says we should train our children in the way they should go. Your boundaries are determined by your values, and your values will determine both your personal and family cultures. Remember, I said a couple of videos ago that embedded within your family's culture are the boundaries that you are setting for your children, and you do have a family culture, even if you've never formally articulated it. Your family's culture is the way things are done in your house. Your family of birth has or had its own culture too, and you must have imported some or all of it into your current family's culture. I'm sure we can agree that we all consciously and unconsciously absorb attitudes, values, sense of right and wrong, relating patterns, and so on from parents and others around us while growing up, which formed these family cultures. What this implies then, since each family is made up of two different cultures, is that we may have similar destinations or goals, but our approaches on how to get there may just differ. The components and effectiveness of the different approaches, depending on the information, training, and skills we have acquired and imbibed along the way, will determine whether we and our kids get to the desired destination in one piece or not. Of course, some of us may rightly ask what the hue and cry about setting boundaries is all about, especially since we may not remember being raised with such and we still turned out all right, right? But the truth is that everyone raised within a family was raised with some form of boundaries, even though they may not have been recognized or identified as being boundaries at that time. In any case, the world parents now have to raise children in is drastically different from theirs. And more than ever before, structure and intentionality may be the deciding factors between a successful life and one that is full of troubles. The need to be able to replicate desired outcomes also means that we have to create structure around intentional parenting. That's precisely why the Bible teaches us, to train our children so we can have peace. If you haven't done this before, or maybe you did it a long time ago, I need you to find an appropriate time with the other parent, where you can sit down together and make a list of your personal and family cultures. Remember, I said earlier that you can include your wish list as well, those things that you are not yet doing, but you wish you were or would like to start. Okay. And please remember to pray and ask the Holy Ghost to help and guide you through the process. And the criteria that I suggest you use is the Ropetus Mildennius quote that says, in essentials, unity, in non-essentials, liberty, and in all things, charity. So, create a list of the essentials, or non-negotiable things or things that can become deal or covenant breakers for you personally. And then share and compare your list with your spouse. The great thing about this exercise is that you are bound to know your spouse even better by the time you're done. For example, praying together every day could be on my list of essentials, right? And please note that this is for my own list, so no pressure, please. But the important thing to remember is that there is no room for bending or yielding under this category of essentials. Usually, what I think should be here are things relating to faith and heart, because God won't bend His rules for anyone. However, I also think missing some days of prayer shouldn't be a deal breaker. So I may want to move it, that is, praying together every day, to the next column of non-essentials, even though I shudder at the thought of categorizing it as such. But that's okay for now. What I just need us to realize is that you may need to move some things around until you are settled in your heart that it truly belongs there. Then tackle the next column, the list of non-essentials. Here, you should have a list of the things that are very important to you, but where not doing or having them will make you or your world fall apart. An example here is, and this is for me personally, please, going to church physically during midweek services. And if I must confess, this became a non-essential for me after COVID-19, okay? For the things on your non-essential list, the key word is liberty, which means that consideration and understanding are key. Now, these are things you want done or to keep away from, all things being equal. And if I can use my example of going to church physically, during midweek services, it means that I will go if it is possible or really required, like if I am the one teaching and I'm required to be physically in the sanctuary to do so. And if it's not possible, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Finally, work on the last list, which should include all the things that have to do with preferences, things that do not impact your faith or credibility or integrity, where you can actually make allowances for your and other people's likes and dislikes. A good example for me is the wearing of makeup or pants as a woman. Now, I know some people may not agree with me, and that's okay, if you want to keep it on your own list of essentials. Now, let me ask a question that's probably going to motivate our thoughts and get our creative juices flowing. Where in any of these three columns would you put internet access for yourself and for your children? I know you may have a ready answer, but I want you to think about it critically and dispassionately. The truth is that the internet is taking over our lives, slowly and progressively. And sometimes it looks like there is nothing we can do about it and to succumb. But I know that it's not true, that we know we have no option other than to align, because the Bible tells us that with God, all things are possible. So, in which column will you put internet access? Like, in which column do you think it belongs? And in which column have we honestly allowed it to resurface? I think it should belong in the column of non-essentials. But with the way we treat our phones and electronic devices, where some children are even wishing and praying that they will be transformed into iPhones so that their parents can pay attention to and love them, don't you agree that it has become an item under the list of essentials? And sometimes it even ranks higher than our relationship with God? Okay, let's move on. Now that you have created the list of values and family cultures, the next step is to form your statements of do's and don'ts from which you will then create the boundaries. Let's take a family's bedtime culture as an example. You make your statement of values like this. In this family or in this house, we insist that everyone needs to get a minimum of 8 hours of sleep. Therefore, bedtime is 6 p.m. for so and you can state the names of those the boundary applies to. Or you can write 6 p.m. for anyone under 5 years old, and then you scale up for other children, including yourselves, the parents, okay? And I picked this example because I personally did not have any success, with enforcing any rules about bedtime when I was raising my kids. I knew that it was good and maybe it was beneficial for all of us, but I probably didn't understand that sleep is an absolute essential for children up until past even their teenage years. So it probably was unconsciously on my preferences or at best my non-essential list. Now, after you have created this boundary, if your 4-year-old, now assuming he's a boy, asks you why he has to go to bed at 6, you should have the explanation on the benefit of sleep and the repercussions of not getting enough sleep that a 4-year-old can easily understand. Very handy. The implication of this is that each of your boundaries must have a purpose, a goal, something good that is adding to your family or something bad that is preventing. Culture or boundary that has no purpose or goal will become a weight and sometimes even a barrier. In the future, when your kids are evaluating your boundaries, probably as they are also trying to set the same for your grandchildren, if they can't see any purpose in the boundaries you gave them, they will conclude that you are either simply mean or that you were not as smart as they thought. I'm talking about giving explicit and understandable explanations, for the boundaries you make for your children. Please understand that the phrase "experience is the best teacher" can sometimes be a lazy way out, especially when saving them from a painful repercussion, by giving a credible explanation could have helped. After creating your family's value statement and the boundaries that need to be set from them, the necessary next step is to also state the consequences of violating the boundaries. This must be clearly spelled out and also age appropriate. Remember that where there are no laws, there is no offense. The consequences may range from correction and punishment, to withdrawal of privileges and then to unmitigated exposure to natural or civil repercussions. This will be discussed in detail in a later episode. I know I said in the beginning of this video that I was going to talk about communicating effectively with our children, but I strongly believe that the Spirit has brought us where He wants and we need to go in this episode. I'm sure He wouldn't want anyone, to suffer from information overload, which might result in mental indigestion. So I will push the conversation about communication to the next video or the one after that. Let me wrap up now by giving us some tips about values and boundaries that would be great to give our children. First, create structure by giving them daily, weekly, and monthly routines. Like I said in my book, From Princess to King, this is the foundation for a disciplined life. Never leave your kids unsupervised, unengaged, or unoccupied. Create boundaries that have to do with faith and the worship of God. Very important in my opinion. Create boundaries that have to do with character and commitment, discipline, and hard work. Create boundaries that will teach them about independence, interdependence, and teamwork. This is vital for family development. And then create boundaries that will guide in choosing their friendships. I agree that I've thrown a lot at you in this video, and I would like to have your feedbacks and questions in return. Please don't hesitate to post your comments on the platform, and I promise to respond to any question or comment that requires an answer or update. See you in another 2 weeks. Shalom.